Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Good day. Welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning class series. I am Sharif Olaizo and I am your civic education tutor. And today, I shall be taking us through drugs and drug abuse, where we shall be carefully considering what drugs are, what drug abuse means, the forms of drugs abuse, types of drugs that can be abused, common ways of abusing drugs, methods of taking drugs, symptoms of drug abuse, behaviors of drug addicts, effects of drug abuse, prevention of drug abuse, ways of prevention of drug abuse, coping skills for youths, drug law enforcement and administration agencies, activities of these law enforcement agencies, and lastly, drug trafficking. Now, we shall begin with what drugs mean. Of course, when we say drug, it is always peculiar to the person who is giving meaning or definition to drugs. To a pharmacist, drugs are chemical preparation for the diagnosis, prevention, or treatment of diseases or ailments. Of course, to an ordinary man, drug would mean medicine. And of course, to those who fall under this term, drug addicts, it is a body enhancer, a spirit uplifter, and so on and so forth. However, a drug can be defined as any chemical or biological substance which, when taken into the body by any means whatsoever, creates changes to the functions of the body or behavior of the person or user. If it changes the functioning for good, it is regarded to as medicine. But if it changes the function negatively, then it is regarded to as drug. There are 3 points that need to be noted in the said definition. There are 3 points that need to be noted in the said definition. As a chemical substance, a drug may be natural or synthetic. Secondly, the change in body functions could be physical, psychological, or both. Thirdly, the substance can be taken into the body orally, by injection, smoking, sniffing, inhaling, or even rubbing on the skin. It is important to note that this definition covers the following: that medicines of all types, usually prescribed by qualified medical personnel to cure illness, prevent disease, relieve pain, induce sleep, or generally keep us healthy. And under this definition also, there are socially acceptable substances which are not medicines. For example, alcohol, cigarettes, snuff, cola nuts, coffee, and tea. You may be surprised that what is tea finding under this category. Of course, tea is a drug because it has certain functions it performs in the body, and it could be abused as well. Known as drugs, too, are certain illegal substances which have psychoactive properties. The common ones here in Nigeria are cannabis, which is called Indian hemp, heroin, cocaine, and amphetamines. Another group of illegal drugs are the hallucinogens, though not known to be found in Nigeria. There are also inhalants. These are not medicines, neither are they socially acceptable. They are not even illegal in Nigeria. Instead, they are chemical substances used at homes and workplaces. The common ones are petrol, glue, rubber solution used by vulcanizers in patching tubes and tires, and many other items that fall under this group. Of course, they can be abused by certain individuals who have become addicted to perhaps their odor by sniffing them or applying them through other means. Having discussed what drugs mean, I believe you have an insight into what drugs may mean. These are stuffs that fall under analgesics like Panadol, sedative or sleeping drugs, cocaine, heroin, cough syrup, alcohol, marijuana, amphetamines, anabolic steroids such as those that are injected to enhance the body physique, hallucinogens, inhalants, nicotine, cigarettes, snuff, coffee, and so on and so forth. Now that you have an idea of what drug means, a question is going to pop up on the screen right about now. I want you to carefully consider providing answers to the question. And while you do so, I have with you. Now, you're welcome back. I'm going to be treating with you what drug abuse means. Drug abuse refers to the use, especially by self-administration, without prescription by doctors, pharmacists, or health experts, of any drug in a manner that deviates from approved medical or social pattern with a given culture or society. Simply put, drug is abused when it is taken without medical prescription. For instance, I wake up in the morning, I feel a slight headache, of which I am not sure if the slight headache is as a result of my sleeplessness during the night, or stress during the previous day, or fever. I decide to prescribe for myself certain drugs such as paracetamol, or Panadol, or even tramadol. Then I decide to walk into a chemist. I didn't complain what happened to them. I enter a local chemist and I order for certain drugs mixed together for me to tackle what I am feeling at the moment. Of course, when I get these drugs and I administer them on myself, I use them, I have simply abused drugs. It involves indiscriminate use of any drug. It is the misuse or improper way of using drug to your body. For instance, cocaine has certain chemicals which are effective in curtailing certain illnesses. But then, it doesn't go to mean that you can administer it to yourself without prescription. In fact, no prescription for cocaine. You can only induce it into your body through other drugs that contain a very bare and limited volume of it. What we mean by this is that there are certain drugs that contain analgesics or cocaine, but there is a certain limit and bare volume of cocaine in such drugs. Therefore, when you are using those drugs without prescription, it goes to mean that you are abusing the drug. According to NDLEA, drug is said to be abused when its use is not medically necessary or for non-medical purpose. Of course, there are some youths of nowadays who will just wake up and think, okay, fine, now that I've woken up, I'm feeling uneasy, I need to take tramadol, I need to take Fensic, I need to take Alabukun, I need to take Panadol, no. All of these things are drug abuse when they are not targeted at certain medical necessities or purposes. Of course, its use is illegal when it is legally prohibited. There are certain drugs that are prohibited across the world, such as cocaine, heroin, and other narcotics, and so on and so forth. These drugs, when used, you don't have to be prescribed. They don't have to be prescribed for you. You have abused them because they are legally prohibited. And if caught under the law, you will be prosecuted. It is excessively and persistently self-administered. Of course, when it is excessively and persistently self-administered, you have abused it. Ideally, it is advised and allowed that you can use paracetamol for headaches. But when you begin to use paracetamol incessantly, without prescription, you have started abusing such drugs. It is important to note that most of the prescription drugs are not abused, rather, they are misused. This occurs when such drugs are taken outside the given prescription, which could be overdose or underdose, or even without prescription at all. By this, we mean self-medication, or taken for the wrong condition. What are we saying here? Certain drugs are not abused, but they are misused. For instance, you are given prescription to use certain cough syrups. But because this cough has refused to live on time, you decide to use more than the volume of what you are required. You are asked to take 2 teaspoonfuls in the morning and in the night. But of course, because you want to chase this cough away, in no time, you begin to use 4 teaspoons every hour, which may result to overdose. And of course, underdose rather. When you are asked to use certain drugs, but because of fear for drugs, yes, you start using them under the limit of the prescription. Let me share an experience with you. When I was in secondary school, we were just in our food shed, and then the next thing we noticed was that an individual was surrounded by a crowd of students. On getting there, I realized that this student was sweating profusely. The boy during our school days then, was popularly called Biggie. He was sweating profusely, and he was so unconscious. The women selling foods at the food shed came to our rescue, poured water on him, and tried to resuscitate him back to consciousness. And when he was brought back to consciousness, what we realized was that he had taken overdose of paracetamol tablets. He has used 6 out of the 12 that is on a sachet, of which the limit at that age should be maximum of 2. Maximum of 2, nothing more than that. There are so many other consequences of overdose or underdose. There are different forms of drug abuse. Forms of drug abuse. Taking medicine without doctor's prescription, taking drugs beyond doctor's prescription doses, like we just talked about, taking fake, expired and wrong doses of drug. Of course, fake and expired drugs are there in the market. Most of them are sold cheaply, and we are quick to buy them because we find them cheap. Such drugs, when administered to the body, are called drug abuse. Smoking excess cigarettes at a time. Of course, if you are the type that watches television or listens to radio, you will know that immediately after adverts of cigarettes, it is always advised that smokers are liable to die young. Or on the packets of cigarettes, if you have seen one before, you will see on it that it is written that Federal Ministry of Health warns that smokers are liable to die young. And of course, imagine when smokers are liable to die young, somebody else is now taking it excessively. They are smoking cigarettes excessively. Come to think of what will happen to that person. So we regard excessive taking of cigarettes, even though it is legal, as drug abuse. Getting drunk with alcoholic drinks. Of course, beers, alcoholic wines, locally brewed oats, palm wines, and so on, are capable of causing certain harms to the body. When you take excess volume of alcohol to your body, then certain harms may be caused. You will become drunk, and by this we regard it as drug abuse. Frequent taking of substances like coffee, painkilling drugs, and so on, like we said earlier about tramadol, Fensic, alabukun, and so many other drugs that can be abused. Taking drugs that can change your user's mood and perception. Of course, when I was in the university, I know of a friend who said he cannot walk up to a lady and talk to her unless he had taken certain drugs into his body. By this person will be regarded to as a drug addict, and it will be said that they are abusing drugs. Taking narcotics or hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, Indian hemp, and anabolic steroids are regarded to as drug abuse. Types of drugs that can be abused. We have hard drugs. They are very strong and powerful drugs like heroin, morphine, cocaine, and other narcotics. We have the soft drugs. These are not as strong as the hard drugs. They are in the classes of marijuana, cigarettes, and so on. We have the recreational drugs. These are drugs people take for pleasure, such as cigarettes, like we said earlier. Performance-enhancing drugs. These are drugs sportsmen and women take illegally in order to improve their performances. Most times, sportsmen people are subjected to drug tests to show if they have taken such drugs. If you are the type that is very in tune with sports and sporting activities, you will realize that before every major competition staged by FIFA, IAAF, International Athletic Federation, they always administer drug tests. And sometimes it is called dope test on individuals that are going to be partaking in sports events. And when they find out that they have taken certain drugs that are not allowed in the bid to enhance their performances, to be able to perform more than their peers, more than their competitors, it is said that they have failed that dope test or that they have failed drug test, and they could be punished by being banned for certain years or for life, or from that competition only. Of course, we have talked about drugs that can be abused earlier. These are the common ways through which drugs can be abused. Misuse of prescription drugs. Of course, when you are given certain doses to use, within certain durations, you should keep to this dose and duration. You are asked to take a teaspoonful in the morning, a tablet in the morning, a tablet at night, a teaspoonful at night. Keep to it. Do not go on to use it every hour. Do not go on to use it in the afternoon because you have not seen changes. Wait for your dose to finish. And if your symptoms still persist, you are advised to go to the clinic and lodge another complaint, instead of you trying to administer for yourself what is not prescribed for you. Self-medication. This is the art of administering or using drugs without consulting a medical personnel at all. In fact, this can worsen condition or health of the user and lead to untimely death. We have witnessed this in the past. Excessive intake of alcoholic drinks is another common way through which drug could be abused. Taking of hard drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. Heavy consumption of certain substances. In fact, there are some eatable substances such as cola nut, coffee. These things are capable of taking away sleep for the consumer, which is another way of abusing drug. When I was in school, there are some of my classmates who, when they want to read, whenever they wanted to read, they always try to use coffee so that they can remain awake until the following morning. Of course, there was a particular exam semester when they decided to get 2 tins of coffee. There were just 3 of them. They decided to take 2 tins of coffee. They bought it. The first one, they poured it inside water and they stirred and consumed it. After which, they started using spoon overnight to take the remaining powder in the other tin. They did this until early morning. And when it's morning, they left the library, they went to their respective places. Let me share with you that one of them was not able to come to the exam hall. Why? Because he became so unconscious when he got to the hall that he slumped and slept off. And he slept until after the exam period. Of course, they tried reaching him, they called him on phone severally, but he was not able to pick up. And nobody would want to leave their exam to go and look for somebody in their hostel. Of course, the rest of the remaining two, what happened to them? In the course of writing the exams, one of them began to feel drowsy. He was feeling so sleepy that at some point, he fell into slumber and slept off. The other one, he totally collapsed and he was rushed to the school clinic. At the end of the day, the first one that was not able to come for exam automatically scored 0 for that exam. The other one, who slumped, wrote exam and failed. The third one, which was rushed to the exam, had to retake the exam. Who was rushed to the clinic, had to retake the exam. And this automatically results to failure for the 3 of them. So it is not advised that you take certain eatable and edible things excessively. Taking of performance-enhancing drugs. Some sports people, as said earlier, take performance-enhancing drugs. This is not allowed in certain events such as Olympics, Commonwealth Games, FIFA organized events such as World Cup, Nations Cup, Euro Cup, and so on and so forth. There are certain methods of taking drugs. These are smoking the leaves, e.g. opium leaves. If you are familiar to opium leaves, some people will just go and get it and start sniffing it, swallowing the tablets or liquid, injecting through the vein substances like morphine, heroin, pentazazine, and so on. Inhaling, for instance, cocaine, sprays, glues, paint, thinner, nail polish remover, and so on. Some people even inhale petrol just for pleasure. Licking or snuffing powder, commonly known as snuff, cocaine, heroin, snuffs, and tobacco could be administered this way. Symptoms of drug abuse. But before we talk about the symptoms of drug abuse, let's quickly talk about the reasons why some people indulge in drugs. One of which is peer pressure. Some people bow for pressure. I know of a friend who was forced into drinking alcohol for the first time because they told him it would enhance him and make him be confident enough to ask questions in class. Some people indulge in drug abuse because of social pathologies such as employment and economic frustration. Some people, when they are too frustrated, when life has so much provoked them, they tend to resort to drug and drugs abuse. Emotional and psychological stress. These are characterized by anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. Like I said earlier, my friend that cannot approach a lady until he takes certain drugs. Environmental influence from family, school, workplace, neighborhood, or community. Adverts in the mass media also makes certain drugs more popular and brings a desire to certain youths to engage in such drugs to enhance performance, and then occupational predisposition. Certain people cannot work if they have not taken certain drugs. Some people who drive long distance may want to take marijuana just for them to remain awake while driving 8, 9, 10 hours. The following are the symptoms of drug abuse. But before we go into that, let me remind you that drug abuse could lead to drug addiction. Drug addiction, which means the constant need or craving for drugs. Addiction means that the use of psychoactive drugs has changed the brain system so that it begins to need drugs. The addicted brain needs drugs the way the healthy brain needs natural and ordinary pleasures like food and sleep. Of course, what are we talking about here? That drug addiction is a preconditioned state of existence and life, a lifestyle that requires certain preconditions way of life. That is what addiction means. That is drug addiction. There are some people who cannot exist, who cannot function well without administering drugs to themselves. And they have become so addicted to these drugs that they feel anxious, emotionally let down, they feel dejected, they lose self-esteem, and so on and so forth when they do not use these drugs. Of course, their brain has so much adapted to the functioning of these drugs that if the brain does not see these drugs or feel it in its system, it cannot function well. People addicted to drugs depend on them to feel normal and avoid the painful symptoms of withdrawal. It is always very hard for them to withdraw from drug addiction. Drug addiction is a sickness, and to recover from it, the addict first needs to admit that he or she is addicted to it. In fact, that he has a drug problem, and then he should seek help from family, friends, doctors, and counselors. These are signs of drug abuse, signs and symptoms of drug abuse. Of course, there are certain vital signs to watch out for by people, especially parents, to identify a child involved in drug use. They need to be able to recognize early use of drugs is very important. Early detection, coupled with prompt intervention, goes a long way in helping to redress the problem. The signs are possession of the drug itself, whether peculiar plants such as weeds or powdery substances. Possession of drug-related paraphernalia such as pipe, rolling papers, also known as Rizla, syringes, lighters, matches, bottle openers, ashtrays, and everything that you know can be used to administer drugs for drug addicts. Unusual use of perfume, air freshener, incense, mosquito coil, insecticides, chewing gum, licking of sweets, eating of groundnuts sometimes, all as a cover-up to suppress the odor or smell of drugs. Being unusually withdrawn or erratic, tardiness and transit from school, lack of good performance at school, deviant behavior, e.g. stealing, lying, fighting, making trouble with constituted authorities, deterioration in health. Sometimes you see drug addicts, their health becomes worse. Some of them cannot even walk upright. Some of them cannot do rigorous exercise for, say, less than 30 minutes. Memory lapses, some of them suffer memory loss, short attention span, they cannot pay attention and concentrate on something for so long. Poor physical coordination, blurred or incoherent speech, some of them stutter when they talk. Their tongues twist when they speak. Unhealthy appearance, indifference to personal hygiene. Sometimes when you see certain drug addicts, they look so awkward, so untidy, so unclean, so unkempt. Some of them, their clothes may be torn, and they wouldn't even mind or notice. Identification with drug culture, music, slogans, or clothing, increasing and inappropriate anger, hostility, irritability, secretiveness, and so on. Reduced maturation, reduced energy, reduced self-indiscipline, reduced self-esteem. Of course, Some of them, their eyes become unnecessarily red. Some of them have to wear dark glasses to avoid people seeing into their eyes and suspecting that they are drug addicts. Effects of drug abuse. Of course, drug abuse has very serious effects on both the individual and the society at large. It has social, health, economic, and physical consequences. Medically or physically, the user is exposed to having serious health problems that affect vital organs and functions of the body. These include damage to the brain and liver, heart and drug diseases, irregular heartbeat, high blood pressure, hepatitis, AIDS, loss of self-control, nervous breakdown, lung cancer, especially for smokers, heart disease for smokers as well, impotence, some of them cannot perform, kidney problem, damage to unborn babies. Certain drugs, when used, can cause damage to fetus in pregnant women. Poor blood supply and circulation, premature death, and so on. Under the psychological class of effects of drug abuse, we have sleeplessness. Some of them will not be able to sleep at night. Restlessness, you see them walking up and down. If you have seen a madman who ran mad or contacted or had mental illness due to drug abuse, you see that what they do is walking around the town. Anxiety, depression, psychosis, paranoia, hallucination, delusion, and craving desire. There are some socio-economic effects too, which are loss of all sense of judgment against people, disruptive of relationship with people, deviant behavior, laziness, truancy in school, divorce, prostitution, loss of job, poor academic performances, criminal activities, family disintegration, industrial and traffic accidents. That is why they advise that when you drink, do not drive. When you drive, do not drink. Loss of self-control, accidents in the workplace, reduced maturation, rejection by society, financial problems, untidy personalities, mental illness, profuse sweating, discoloration of the lips, colored teeth, diminished sensitivity, chronic alcoholism, and drug trafficking. Now, ways through which you can prevent drug abuse. The drug problem or drug abuse is a global plague affecting both developed and developing nations of the world. It is a problem that affects virtually every aspect of a nation's political, social, and economic life. In dealing with this social malady, the federal government has put in place several laws against the abuse and trafficking in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. It has equally established control bodies or agencies such as the NDLEA, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and NABTEB, National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. The agencies are charged with the dual responsibilities of reducing the supply and demand of these drugs. They have adopted many prevention strategies, including drug abuse, preventive education in tackling this drug issue. The following are ways through which they have devised to prevent drug abuse. Through education of the masses, through control measures of supply and circulation of drugs, through reduction in the demand of drugs, which is directed at reducing the consumer demand for these drugs. This is done by carrying out campaigns, seminars, and workshops. Families too are often the hardest hit by drug problems. Parents and guardians are therefore advised to monitor their children. Their activities should be monitored, and when they notice certain changes, they should be quick and prompt in intervening in their lives. Parents should also work closely with the school authorities Individual as well should encourage to get himself or herself well informed about drugs and related issues. They should as well extend this education that they have about drug abuse to other people of their peers. The school have a vital role to play in preventing drug abuse by stating clearly the punishments for breaking these rules, determining the nature and extent of drug use, and monitor these closely and firmly. Of course, the religious organizations have a very big role to play. Sensitization during religious activities, preaching, sermons that have to do with drugs and drugs abuse should be periodically looked into. The traditional and opinion leaders also have roles to play. Of course, by donating to the cause of sensitization against drugs and drugs abuse, they should also help to give financial, material, and moral support to anti-drug projects. They should assist in drug law enforcement agencies in identifying and fishing out drug dealers and offenders within their communities. Local government councils have their roles to play by establishing recreation centers to keep young people gainfully occupied, by training of health workers, teachers, information officers, and strategic officers for combating drug menace. Of course, the law enforcement agencies, as stated earlier, such as NDLEA and NABTEB, the police, the customs, prisons, judiciary, and road safety authorities should provide adequate support for other organizations and bodies involved in the control and material support, provision of resource persons, security, and legal support. They can also organize different training programs and enlightenment for people in societies. Non-governmental organizations have a great role to play. They can help grassroots mobilization by organizing awareness programs. They can help in designing and implementing drug control strategies and programs. They can secure local and international sponsorship on drug demand reduction. They should work hand in hand with drug law enforcement agents. And this brings us to coping skills for youth. Of course, these are abilities required to resist illicit drug use or abstain from drug abuse. Before you can escape drug abuse and illicit drug use and resist it, you have to possess certain qualities, which are: 1, arm yourself with information about drugs and drug abuse. Have enough information about drugs and drug abuse. Be assertive when saying no. When you mean no, when you say no, mean it and do not deviate from that no, especially when your peers are forcing you or mounting pressure on you to engage in certain drugs, abuse, or other vices. Change the subject and suggest alternative activities. Ignore the person and walk away when that person persists that you should take drugs. Be involved in hobbies, recreational activities, religious activities, and so on. Avoid places where drugs are sold and where people who use drugs stay. Build self-esteem and concentrate on your positive qualities while under stress. Be committed to your academic and school activities. Obey rules and regulations in the schools. When in problem, confide in your parents, teachers, religious leaders, or a trusted adult. Use your understanding of drugs to help your peers and others around you. Avoid and resist drugs. Encourage those using drugs to seek help. Report those using or selling drugs to parents, school authorities, or law enforcement officials. Of course, it will take a long time to develop these skills. But then, when you are consistent in it and you mean it, of course, these skills would be automatically would become automatic in you. That brings us to drug law enforcement and administrative agencies. Of course, the major ones in Nigeria are the NDLEA and NABTEB. There are 3 legally binding major international treaties currently in force to govern international drug control. They are as follows: the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1961, which was further strengthened by the 1972 Protocol, which amended it. the Convention on Psychotropic Substances in 1971, and the third one is the United Nations Convention Against the Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drug and Psychotropic Substances in 1988, I beg your pardon. In the area of the control of drug supply, NDLEA, as a law enforcement agent, have two sets of law. One is that the pharmacy laws, which are concerned with the manufacture and purchase, distribution and use of legal drugs for medical and research purposes. The other one is the second set of law, which relates to the control of illegal cultivation, manufacture, purchase, trafficking, and use of illegal drugs such as Indian hemp, heroin, and cocaine. In Nigeria, the first drug policy was enacted in 1935, with the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance by the colonial powers. Since 1935 to 1966, there have been a series of decrees, laws on drugs with various punishments and numerous amendments and replacements until currently. Presently, the drug laws are as follows. Any person who manufactures, produces, processes, plants, grows, imports, and possesses their drugs such as cocaine, heroin, and other similar drugs will be sentenced to life imprisonment. Any person who exports, transports, or traffics in cocaine, heroin, or similar drugs will be sentenced to a jail term not more than 20 years. Any person who sells, buys, or exposes for sale of same drugs in an unlawful manner will attract jail term of 14 years. Anyone who uses the hard drug by smoking, inhaling, injecting, or possessing any of the hard drug will be sentenced to a jail of not more than 10 years, but can be less. Anyone who uses premises as a store or warehouse for the hard drug will be sentenced to jail term of 25 years or less than that. Any person who offers assistance to conspire with drug pushers or users will be sentenced to a jail of 25 years or less than that. Anyone caught impersonating an NDLEA official will be sentenced to a jail term of 16 years or less than that. Any attempt to escape from the police custody or prison yard by a drug trafficker attracts a jail term of 7 years or less than that. Any person who has the equipment or material and uses it for the production or processing of hard drugs will be jailed. Of course, that brings us to the end, to the last topic in this series, which is drug trafficking.